Hello and welcome to Island Connections. I'm Ibrahim Aoude. Hawaii, the politics of growth. And we have two guests with us to discuss this topic. Marti Townsend, environmental activist. Thank you for taking the time to come over.
Thank you for having me.
And Bart, he's a political activist, but also, these are the environment
very
as
different
well.
animal.
Yes. And we just begin by talking about, first of all, how did you come to being an activist and working in terms of the environment and other things, political and non-political?
Well, I grew up in the age of recycling, so I remember trying to push my family to separate the trash, and we were talking about energy efficiency and things of that nature, and so I grew up in that context, and then as I got more and more aware of my surroundings and how decisions are made, I realized we have to go far beyond just managing our waste in different receptacles and flipping off the light switch, that we really need to be working on more fundamental changes to the way our society operates in order to live in balance with the environment. And so I got more involved in the politics of environment as opposed to the cleaning up of environment.
All right, wonderful. And Bart, we've known each other for the longest time. So how did you get involved?
Well, I didn't really know anything about politics until I met you, and I've modeled my intellect on yours. I grew up here, and in a time where Hawai'i still had more of an authentic feel than it has now, less development. And I guess people who were born before me would say the same thing about the time they grew up. And I grew up on the windward side, and my dream and my girlfriend's dream was after high school we would move up to country and we'd live on the land and grow kids and maybe goats and a few crops. And so that wasn't very realistic. I became a construction worker when I wasn't a student. And then the struggle at Waihoʻoli Waikani erupted. And I think that was one of the first times I got drawn into political activism, trying to keep the country, trying to preserve the land and trying to keep it in ag so that the kind of utopian future I anticipated for myself would be available for us. And of course, collectively, we won that battle, and that encouraged me and motivated me to continue to be involved with political things.
And then, you got involved also in politics and like legislative politics and all of that. Not that you are in the legislature, but party politics and legislative politics. Could you say something about that?
Yes, the root of that corruption was when Jesse Jackson ran for president in 88. He ran in 84 and I wasn't involved.
Yeah.
And then in 88 as that approached, so starting around 86, other activist friends of mine who were involved in his campaign said, come on board, come and help. And I got involved. And in fact, I think I was the first member of the Rainbow Coalition to be elected to the State Central Committee of the Democratic Party, and I've largely been stranded and partly abandoned in that position ever since.
Yeah. And Marti, you're active in an organization or more than one organization?
Yeah, I try to stay involved in community activism as much as possible. I'm currently the executive director for the Outdoor Circle. And we do work to help keep Hawaii clean, green, and beautiful. Everything from on-the-ground beautification projects that volunteers do throughout the islands to advocacy work at various county councils and also the state legislature.
If we begin with the larger picture, and then we start going into giving examples of what's happening in Hawaii in terms of the question of growth, the question of climate change, and so forth. We were talking earlier about Naomi Klein coming over and, her book That Changes Everything and how it is important, an important book, and people are already attacking it on the right, attacking the book and so on. So could you tell us something about that and what her main theme is in the book because and how it might be relevant to what we are doing here in Hawaii in terms of, protecting the environment and so forth.
Well, I really appreciated her book because I feel like it speaks to a new generation of environmental advocates. Because it addressed the question of we are stuck in this system that we can't really get out of. We're born into it, and we are heavy-footed, ecologically speaking, and we take far more than we deserve. And it's really hard for us to break out of that. What do we do? And I think she helped to give voice to that concern, and recognizing that just because we are living in a fossil-fueled economy doesn't mean that we are somehow hypocrites for speaking out against it. We recognize the problems that it inherent to it, and we're working hard to get us off this addiction, and while at the same time we recognize we still have to drive a car and turn on the lights. So I also appreciated that she made a point of calling out the fact that we need actual organization, system-wide change. People need to get together and work together for collective action, that just making individual consumer choices is not going to be enough to flip this system. And so I found the book very inspiring. And I think she really got down to the rub of it, which is basically that capitalism, as it is currently practiced in the U.S. and most developed countries, directly contradicts or makes impossible efforts to address climate change. There is no way we can address the problems of climate change without addressing the fundamentals of capitalism.
Yeah, Bart?
Well, I found her talk surprisingly, maybe perversely, optimistic. And what she seemed to be saying is a couple of things which are against conventional wisdom. But one of the things she was saying is the fact that the crisis of capitalism, in terms of how it expresses itself environmentally, in terms of climate change, is so serious that we cannot avoid it. We cannot just do the recycling stuff in order to solve this. We have to deal fundamentally with the inherent logic of capitalism. And I may be a little more reformist than you, because I actually believe that we have to mitigate capitalism. Whether we can transcend it, I don't know, but let's at least mitigate it. And what we really have to mitigate is the internal logic of capitalism, where they try to privatize all of the gains and they try to externalize all the costs, right? So pollution is a cost. If the people downwind get bad lungs, if the workers, take in toxins, that's not their problem. They do have a problem when the climate change is severe, but even in that case, and Hawaii plays a special role here, there are gated communities to which the wealthy elite of the world can go in order to try to escape, which is one reason why we have very wealthy people from all over the world buying second and third homes in luxury condos in Waikiki and in Kaka'ako, and that's distorting the effects here. But she said we have to confront the logic of capitalism directly. We have to think outside the box, and we don't have any choices. So someone said to her, well, why are you trying to take on capitalism at the same time?
Wasn't it bad enough to try to take on climate change by itself? Why'd you have to add on the burden of trying to address capitalism? It makes it awfully hard. And I liked her response.
Which was?
Well, that it actually makes it much easier, because when you think about it, capitalism isn't actually doing all that great for most people, right? Most people are suffering under capitalism, and they would benefit if we severely reformed it. And that we should take that as a good thing, as a good sign. It's not like capitalism is serving all of our basic needs. Majority of people are prospering under it, except for this small issue of climate change. So, I like her reverse way of thinking about it. Because you gotta face it, Bart. Optimism sells, man. We gotta have hope.
Yeah.
Okay, keep hope alive. It's a common theme.
Yeah. But the other thing, in fact, the relationship between climate, all this pollution and all of that, and capitalism, which is, global capitalism now. It's not anything else, right? So there is this direct connection and relationship. So how can you mitigate or get rid of these environmental problems without doing something about capitalism, or create a different kind of situation where it's not like, as you said, socializing the cost and privatizing the benefits, profits, which would be profits, yeah. So you got to do something about that. And it's critical. If you want to deal with cleaning up the environment and, moderating climate change, etc., then you have to deal with, you have to go for the jugular, which is like, deal with capitalism, right? I mean, so that's the point.
When you go to the jugular, do you bite it? What do you do? It's like, going for the jugular is quite a graphic term. Yeah. Let me suggest this. There are aspects of our society that are already handled socially, right? Education is handled socially. There are efforts to privatize it more and more, and we see that in various initiatives to private schools of various sorts. But in the past, we've regarded that as a social function. Law enforcement is a social function. When you look at things like not just the environmental crisis under capitalism, but things like the housing crisis, where more and more people are being kicked to the curb, literally kicked to the curb, because the private market for housing tries to maximize profits, and so they only want to build for that sector that has enough money to be able to buy expensive housing. So more and more, and it's not because of lazy people, it's not because they're all drug infested or whatever excuse is used, more and more vulnerable people are being kicked to the curb. They don't earn enough wages, they don't have high enough salaries to pay for housing as provided in the market system.
Despite having a full-time job, despite having an education, despite all the things that you would think would help to provide for that kind of basic necessity. Our society is not set up to ensure that people have their basic needs met.
And, moving towards the title of the show, but this was all by way of introduction to show the larger picture. Capitalism and growth. When I was doing political science, as a student, everything growth, and the GDP grows at 3.5% per annum, and all of that. Okay, so there's a problem, if capitalism continues on so long there is growth, and we wouldn't have crises if there is growth and so on. But growth has all kinds of byproducts, including environmental disasters, right? Environmental disasters. So Love Canal, that's one thing, right? So what is then, how would you begin to mitigate the question of growth, or do you want growth? We were talking earlier and you said, growth, what is that? We don't want growth, we want something else. Well, what is that? Why don't we want growth, one, and what is that something else?
Well, I don't think we want unlimited growth. I think the analogy that at least works for me is cancer. Cancer grows, and that's the problem with it, is that it continues to grow at an unnatural rate to the point that it kills its host. And capitalism, unregulated, has a similar relationship to the planet. And so if we continue to allow unfettered growth, we are eventually going to kill our host. And so we need to self-regulate. And what we want is a system, an economic system that allows for every basic need to be met, and for people to live full and complete lives, reach their potentials without sacrificing the futures of our kids. I have kids, and I'm not looking forward to the world that I'm leaving them. So I want to take some action to prevent that. So. I think the thing that was most eye-opening for me from Naomi Klein's book and in terms of this conversation about growth is that when we want to talk about climate change and capitalism, what we're really talking about are trade regulations. And it's because when I was in high school, all you people were making decisions that allowed for NAFTA to happen and any other number of horrible trade agreements.
It was my fault.
It was your fault. I knew it. That allowed those kind of policies to take root, and even having big green organizations say, yeah, okay, we could back NAFTA, is sowed the seeds of the situation we're living in now, where we have a global economy, global capitalism, and now you can actually pen the environmental tragedy to the actions of this or that company. That you're having activities happen, whatever pollution produced in China for consumption actually done in the U.S., and the harms are felt somewhere around the world where the air has been polluted because of the factories in China. So, so now the problem is, much more remote, larger and much more removed, but still very direct and severe. And so, I think people need to get more involved in things like the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, the TPP, things like that.
One thing first, it's his fault. North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, is his fault.
Yeah.
So please go ahead.
Defend yourself.
Actually, I didn't like NAFTA. I didn't support it at the time. I wasn't one of those who thought that they could have these little ancillary side agreements on labor standards and environmental standards, and that would take care of things. That was Bill Clinton's gift to the corporations. And now, of course, we do have the TPP, which is NAFTA writ large, which is not really a trade agreement. That's sometimes how we talk about it. I even find myself talking about it. What it is it's a restructuring of governance. They're planning on shifting control over any decisions that might affect or restrict the profits of an investor, of a corporation. They're planning on shifting decision-making away from your county governments, away from your state governments, even away from your national governments, and transfer these over to these unelected international bodies that will make decisions. So it's a really transfer of governance, it's a transfer of sovereignty to the unelected global elite. This is your new world order that, we were warned about. But I want to go back a little bit to this question of growth. I don't think I'm ready to yet accept that all growth is inherently cancerous, right? If we talk about growth in terms of how do we measure it, right? Increased carbon fuel consumption obviously is bad. Okay. There are limits to that, physical limits to that. Perhaps even if we were to transfer to cleaner energy, still yet maybe we get to some point in the law of thermodynamics where you can't continue to increase more.
Right.
But you can grow jobs in the meantime, for example, by, transferring to clean industry, which may reduce your carbon footprint, right? To make it more sustainable or at least mitigate the growth. You can actually have jobs, and I think Naomi Klein called for this, and your memory is probably fresher than mine, where actually people who are cultural workers, people who are artists, people who are teachers, right? She said teachers are green jobs, right? So there are a lot of jobs where there are people who are adding quality of life to each other and helping perhaps a happiness quotient go, which can be considered growth depending on how you measure growth. Anyway, so I'm not ready to give up on growth. I think, for example, increased productivity, where the output per worker when you do have to work, which often means, according to Mark Twain, doing something the body doesn't naturally want to do on its own. If you do have to work, if I could produce the same amount of widgets in fewer hours due to innovations in technology, then that's a good thing, so long as we're not at the same time increasing the output of carbon fuels. Right.
Yeah. Well, okay. That's why I mentioned juxtapose growth with development. The kind of growth you're talking about is embedded in the notion or the concept of development, which means actually that development is something positive and something that would benefit, let's say, the majority of the population. That speaks for instance, jobs like in alternative energy sources, jobs, and this is like more jobs, so the jobs will be growing. But the notion that it is not growth like, unfettered by any kind of regulations, you mentioned regulations, etc., and something that would benefit at least the majority of the population and does not socialize costs and privatize profits. So it's much more just, much more egalitarian and so forth. So egalitarianism becomes something not only in politics but in economics and society and culture and all of that. And how all these, politics, economics, culture, etc., interact in such a way to create something that is synergic, synergy for the benefit of the people. So the growth that you are talking about is not growth with, let's say, pollution, 100% pollution or high rates of pollution, but maybe development with some kind of pollution that then you can create more jobs and grow those jobs to counter that kind of pollution, as an example. What?
Yeah, I don't think it's, to talk about growth, economic growth, in the terms that are currently used, I think is generally harmful, because we allow for the externalization of the cost of that economic growth. But if we're talking about a more holistic growth that ensures that people have jobs, people have homes, and our environment is protected, that's the kind of growth you want. And it's all about living in a symbiotic relationship.
And that's like in politics, we call it development, because it's something not just 3.4% growth a year or whatever, but what's happening to the environment, what's the cost. If the cost is more than the benefit for society, because economists like to talk about society would benefit or lose or whatever. If the cost is more for society by having say 3% growth a year, then that might be not growth, because then you'll be losing funds to counter all these kinds of problems, that are a consequence of, or that might be a consequence of, some kind of industrial activity, for instance, So that's.
I think it's important for us to try to actually, we should strive to create a society where we don't have to have Superfund sites. We don't have to have money set aside to clean up.
That's a good one.
Like I'm all for transition, and you take the auto making plant, the plant that made cars, and you use it instead to make solar panels. That's great. Yeah. But there's still a lot of chemicals that are used in making solar panels or computers or whatever that have really bad effects on the environment. And it's really, the brightest minds of the planet should be putting their brain cells to the question of how do we live a modern, comfortable life without having, cadmium leach from our batteries and into the environment.
Yeah. On the Trans-Pacific Partnership, I'm glad we're talking about it a little bit, and this is just before we go into specific issues about Hawaii, etc., because this is the context in which, things happen in Hawaii, right, in terms of even public policy, how it has been globalized, and so forth, to catch up with, global capitalism, right? We want to attract more people here and all of that and more investment. Which is good for growth, but maybe not for development, you know what I'm saying? So the question of Trans-Pacific Partnership. If, for instance, a community or a state wants to fight pollution by using other kinds of fuels or whatever, these international bodies with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a corporation might sue you and say, you cannot do that given the regulations and given the agreements of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So that which is trumpeted as something great for humanity and, connects people together and lifts up people from poverty in Vietnam or wherever, or Bangladesh, etc., is not doing any of that. Is maybe working, against this kind of propaganda about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, but at the same time, those ephemeral bodies sitting somewhere, can interfere, as you said, in the politics of the place, local politics. It could be local politics in Mississippi, but local politics to try and improve the environment there. You see what I'm saying? Because, this by agreement or by contract, TPP contract, is against, unlawful, right? So the attorneys would determine what you and I want to do in our neck of the woods. And this is harmful, but of course it's good for profits, etc. And as you said, let them stay on the sidewalk and let them breathe, I don't know what kind of air, but not fresh air.
Well, it can be argued, if say we were to launch a massive public works project here. Now, right now there's the train, right, which is a proposal.
Is it a public works project?
It has a dimension that's a public works project.
Elements, but elements. Corporations from somewhere else.
This is part of the problem. This is part of the TPP and World Trade Organization neoliberal model.
Right.
Is they're arguing that say we wanted to build housing for Hawaii's people, right? And we were to launch building a bunch of houses. If one component of that was not just to take care of the housing needs of our people, but to provide jobs for our people, we would not be allowed under the TPP kind of logic, and even now under the neoliberal regime, to say these contracts go to locally based corporations. So if a Japanese or Hong Kong or North American company wants to come in and bid on these projects and take all the profits and even bring in their own people to do the work, the free market says we have to allow that. We are not allowed to make this a public works project for our own people.
You're not allowed to protect your own economy.
Yeah. Yes,
Right,
and even in terms of consumption, is you have to allow people from other places, if they have the means to pay for it, to have an equal access to buy the houses or to qualify for the houses. Because otherwise we're interfering with, again, the logic of $1, one vote, which is fundamentally one of the things that's at odds here. The logic of the market is $1, one vote. If you have a fat wallet with $1 million in it,
Then
and the
you
other
win.
guy has $1, then you have 1,000,000 times the strength. Whereas the logic of democracy is one person, one vote. And those, we live in a capitalist society which has elements of democracy, and those two are perpetually in conflict. And in the past, there have been some efforts to mitigate that kind of domination, but now, particularly in the post-Citizens United period, it's the right-wing corporate neoliberal argument of $1, one vote is dominating.
Yeah. Could you say, just before I go to you, something about Citizens United so our viewers can know about it?
Are the Citizens United?
Yeah, that's an ironic choice. Citizens United was a Supreme Court ruling, which actually I think was, they were making a film to attack Hillary Clinton. As Hillary looked like she was going to be the Democratic nominee in 2008, and Obama beat her. But conservatives were targeting Hillary, so they developed a film, and the group that promoted the film was Citizens United. And they claimed that they had the freedom to spend money however they wanted. The Supreme Court saw this as a great case, and they told the plaintiffs, they said, well, we want to reframe your argument, right? They made a particular narrow argument, and the Supreme Court said, no, we want to reframe this argument as to whether corporate spending is free speech. And they decided it was free speech.
Yeah.
And so it's difficult to see exactly how, what ability states have to restrict the expenditure of money from corporations or from private individuals, to enact things like public financing, which for a short while we had a model program, pilot program on the Big Island where any candidate wanting to run for office could qualify for public financing rather than to find corporate sponsors for their political career. And a lot of that stuff has been attacked and wiped out by the Citizens United effort. So there are attempts to try to amend the Constitution, or other people say, we have to wait, we have to elect 18 in a row different Democratic presidents in order to restack the Supreme Court with people who have common sense. But until that happens, the neoliberal logic is going to dominate the political process even more than before.
Yeah, but also Clinton was neoliberal in a lot of his policies, and Obama also.
Yeah.
So there is an imperative for the state, which is here the government of the United States, the federal government, that it has to be, those have to be followed, those imperatives, and you create policies to develop this. But now let me, since we've done the larger picture, the context,
level.
Wait, I have a question.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about Larry Lessig's approach to the whole May Day? Is that a bad idea? Good idea, bad idea? No, what do you think?
No, I mean, no, I let him.
You should have prepared me, because if he talked to me a year ago, I would have said, I really like Larry Lessig, but these are the problems I see with his proposal. But I'm not equipped at short notice with this ambush question.
We have to do another show, okay?
Okay, we'll do that.
Good.
We'll do that. But the one I wanted to talk, given this context, global capitalism, etc., and as I mentioned earlier, Hawaii from long time ago, even before this thing called globalization was, in vogue, the concept of globalization was in vogue. We have governors from Jack Burns, talking about Hawaii becoming the hub of the Pacific, meaning like, in the sense of globalization, what we call now globalization, and attract people from everywhere and investment, this, that, and the other, okay? So here we are in Hawaii, given the constraints that we have in terms of the TPP and everything else. And we have a lot of problems, right? Climate change, we have the rail system, we have a question of water and agriculture, and we also have now the new governor. He's been like 102 days now or something since he got elected. And here we have like this question of the DLNR, Department of Land and Natural Resources. And he just got himself in trouble so far, at least like some kind of flack, right? So I know it's you're close to this particular situation. And so what do you want to tell us about that, and where do you stay on this? What position you take on this?
Well, so the DLNR is a state agency whose function is to protect and enhance the commonly shared public trust, our open space, the things that we all love about Hawaii, our beaches, our mountains, our fresh water, the fish in the sea, this is the function of this department. And this department has a lot of problems. They have been underfunded for many years, chronic underfunding, and therefore understaffed. They have a lot of responsibilities for which they're not always equipped. Preserving historic sites, historic resources is one example. And so it's always been a challenge, I think, for governors to find the right appointment to head up this department. And I think past governors have done a better job so far than Governor Ige. Although I, will forever hold out hope if Governor Ige is watching this. Hold out hope for you, sir. And there's always chance to fix it. And actually, I think he might be trying to fix it. He just announced 3 appointments to the Board of Land and Natural Resources, which I think signals that he's getting the message that first appointment maybe wasn't qualified and too conflicted. But the 3 new appointments are really good. I love them a lot. They are people who have a lot of experience in land use laws and natural resources management. And I'm looking forward to having them serve on the Board of Land and Natural Resources. But I think it's important to note that there's no way that you could negate the harm that an unqualified, potentially heavily conflicted director of the department would cause. And so the nominee for the directorship is a former lobbyist for Castle & Cook Company and Dole Foods. He and when asked what he was the most proud of from his career, he listed, among other things, Koa Ridge development. So he helped to have hundreds of acres of prime agricultural land converted to urban for housing on the west side of Oahu. He's also worked very hard to try to get industrial windmills constructed on conservation land on Lanai, a classic situation of the rural areas being sucked of their natural resources for the benefit of the metropolis. And he has, in his volunteer time, worked for organizations that advocated for the weakening of environmental protections and for asserting private property rights over the public.
And who might that be?
Oh, his name is Carlton Ching, but that part's not that important. And there's a lot put on to whether he's a good guy or not, but I don't actually think that matters that much. I mean, he could be
He's
anybody.
a great father, but I mean...
And good for his kids. I am so happy for them. But that's not really relevant to the question here.
Right.
The point is what is his work career history, who are his friends and allies, and to what extent is he going to be conflicted when he is confronted by developers trying to develop on public lands.
The other thing, only like 2 days ago, the Governor Ige, he was defending that choice. I mean, I think it was on ABC, KITV, I think. But anyway, so...
it's hard to see how he can defend it. And the testimony that's been submitted so far is 9-1 in opposition to the confirmation. So it's an uphill battle for the administration.
But in his defense, he didn't mention anything about what you just said. So it's interesting. I mean, what you said about his history He didn't say anything. He just said he's a good man and he has like administrative skills. And he was looking, the governor was looking for someone with administrative skills.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which doesn't really come across in his resume. I mean, I took a look at his resume, and it's clearly made for the purposes of this appointment. So, I mean, it doesn't go into great detail, but I don't see where he could have managed people. You know, the DLNR is a large department, nearly 1,000 employees, and I don't see anything in his resume that reflects experience managing a group that large. I mean, he talks a little bit about working with the guys on Molokai and you know, with the weed whackers trying to maintain the land.
Like peanuts, you know, so to speak.
That is in his resume. It's managing Molokai.
Which was what, 4
ranch.
people?
He had 4 employees. There are 900 employees at DLNR. So this administrative experience.
900 by 4. How many?
Yeah, and even though he was, I guess he was a vice president of Castle and Cooke, he was in charge of their government and community relations stuff. It means he was a lobbyist. So he's not managing their overall operations in a complicated way. And the DLNR is a complicated agency.
But maybe like, okay, administrative skills are necessary, it seems to me, okay, but all these other things are more important because the DLNR, as someone said, is the most important cabinet position, you know, because it deals with all these things you're talking about, from the skies all the way to the deep down in the ocean.
Yeah,
you know.
exactly.
Ocean floor.
I consider it the backbone of our society here in Hawaii. I mean, we are allowed to live and exist on these beautiful islands because the DLNR is able to protect the public trust resources of the islands.
Yeah, I think that if we look back, I mean, under Linda Lingle, there were attempts to figure how to raise revenue, right, from public lands. That was the Renaissance something or other.
Recreational Renaissance.
Recreational Renaissance. Okay, and it was a rather limited idea, but they were talking about, you know, charging fees for certain kinds of activities, maybe leasing out lands for profit-making things in order to help fund the other operations of the Department of Land and Natural Resources. So as you said, it's grossly underfunded. It gets 1% of the state budget, and it's a huge part of the land mass of the state of Hawaii.
More than 1 million acres.
And then under Abercrombie, he developed this concept of this public land Development Corporation. Again, they're trying to develop, and they were looking at maybe selling off a school in Waikiki to developers in order to raise money.
But that was defeated too, right?
Yeah, but that was not just for it was part of the excuse was to run the conservation functions, environmental protection functions, but it was also the state has financial crisis, right? They had these unfunded liabilities of you public employees with your retirement and your health benefits that the state has to come up with money. So they're looking, how can they generate? Back in the early 19th or 18th, 20th century, early 20th century, they were more naked. The territorial government was more naked about this in terms of they were planting trees, they were looking for lumber, you know, so they were really talking about exploiting the resources. Come the Constitutional Convention of '78, right? They actually enshrine in the Constitution this public trust doctrine that the main mission is to preserve and protect and enhance the natural resources and the cultural resources and historic resources on state lands. So there has been this drive to monetize, to extract revenue from it, and they're still trying to deal with that. I think it's out of balance because I really think that the group of people who picked Carlton Ching, selected him, and ran it by David Ige, were dominated by developers, right? They themselves had a developer mindset. They see all these lands. Now, I haven't worked out, and others have more elaborate theories of the connection between the Castle and Cooke connection, the high incidence of state lands along the train route, and the transit-oriented development, which is a public works project and a source for potential mega profits over the next 50 years or so, which is much larger than the train itself.
Absolutely.
And Castle and Cooke owns a lot of that land, and then having the DLNR control that land, that will provide a hell of a lot of profits for somebody. And I think that the state business and political elite have sort of decided they're going to use the DLNR position to help generate that revenue stream.
Right.
Yeah, there's a bill working its way through the legislature right now that would take $500,000 from the Conservation Land Fund to research the idea of swapping Castle and Cooke ag lands in
Who
central.
introduced this, by the way? Do you know?
Oh, do I know the bill number? No.
No. Who introduced it?
Oh,
No.
Senator Dela Cruz.
Oh, there you go.
I was going to guess that, but hey, Donovan.
So, but the idea is that the state would give the TOD lands that it owns along the rail route to Castle and Cooke to develop affordable housing. Of course, right? We wouldn't build luxury homes, and then the state would own the ag lands that are in central Oahu that for some reason Dole has been unable to sell, despite the fact that Monsanto is so popular here. I don't understand why they don't just swoop up that land that they haven't. And so I think Dole probably has some sort of financial needs. They're probably heavily in debt, and so they're looking to get rid of this ag land, lighten their load. And it would be great if they could swap it in some sweetheart deal with the state for these lands that they could then have entitlements to.
So here we have another example of how capitalism operates on the local level, and how the local capitalists, and maybe not so local, get together and relate to the state in such a way so that they make the state serve their purposes at the expense of the rest of us. I mean, that's an example. Just like when we're talking globally in terms of global capitalism, this is it.
The thing is that this is not new, in my opinion.
I
haven't been around as long as you guys have, but from what I know of history books, we've done this over and over again. I mean, the Land Use Commission was formed in 1963, I think.
Yeah,
going to check me on that. And it was meant to try to regulate land uses, and the large landowners were happy to have the majority of lands dumped into the agricultural bucket because that's what they owned and that's what they wanted to do was large plantations, industrial agriculture. But now that's not making money, they've had to outsource that to cheaper labor. They need to now get over the Land Use Commission and redesignate these lands as urban. So then you have developers, large landowners talking about eliminating the Land Use Commission, for example.
Well, actually, that's why I pointed out to the fact that it was since Governor Jack Burns, all these kinds of ideas been floating around. I mean, I remember Jack Burns talking about diversification of the economy. You know what I'm saying? I mean, this is amazing. And we're still talking about the diversification of the economy. But it's all in terms of growth, and has nothing to do with, with the development in the sense what is important for the people in Kalihi and other places, Waianae and Waimanalo and Papakolea and all of that.
I mentioned getting involved with Waihole Waikani and having this sort of utopian kind of green future vision about how we were going to live our lives, and maybe that was a little bit naive. I mean, I think it was good that I got drawn into
you were very young.
I was young. I had more hair in those days, and more dreams and more idealism. But I watched that film Citizen 4 with Ed Snowden, and he looks out the window and you see Hong Kong, a very small area, right, with all these high rises. And the reality is that Hawaii's niche is not going to be the hub of the Pacific in terms of having corporations based here and then sending out steamships to Asia and bringing back goods and controlling things. It's going to be, more and more, it is going to be one of these gated communities for those people who want to escape from social strife, civil strife, which is going to be exacerbated by the climate change crisis, and who want the stability and the clean water and the health and the security of being in the United States in a stable investment climate. And so the very, very rich from all over are going to continue to buy expensive condos and luxury housing here, pricing us out.
But let me tell you something about that climate change is following them up to here. And if you don't believe me, you go to Ka'ava and see how the erosion is happening on the shoreline. And even the roads are broken. And so they have all these things so people don't park there and, all these barriers.
No, so they're going to harden the shoreline in Waikiki. They're going to raise it up, and we're going to have dike systems in order to protect these investments. But what I'm saying is that the economic growth that naturally will be the niche for Hawaii in the global economy, unless tourism, we change it, is tourism and is luxury housing for the rich people trying to get away from the crisis elsewhere. And local people are going to be servant class, or they're going to be driven out.
Yeah.
which is one reason why we have to all support Local 5, organize those unorganized hotels so that at least it provides some of that money back into the local economy and wages.
I'm glad you're talking this way because she shows the connection between the question of labor, the question of the environment, the question of development.
So we can check off labor. We've handled labor's interests in the show.
No, what I'm saying, it's important.
It's definitely all connected. And,
and
I have to say that selling off public resources to make money is like selling your eyeballs to buy glasses.
Yeah,
Like you're just, you really are undermining the foundation of what makes Hawaii that place that people want to go to escape everything that's horrible about the rest of the world. And so the thing is that even, for Senator Dela Cruz's proposal to do this land swap, it may actually be a good idea. I hold out hope, who knows, right? Keep an open mind. The point is that when you have someone like Carlton Ching in the position of making that decision, I cannot trust that it's a good idea.
Yeah.
There is, the director has so much control and power over the department that even with a few good people on the board, the director can do a lot of damage and can grease a lot of wheels and make sure a lot of deals go through to benefit large landowners, developers, multinational corporations, and actually undermine the public's interests. And that's the part that the trust issue, I think, is at the core root of why he's a poor choice, in addition to being unqualified.
I mean, look at Ching versus William Isla. Not that William Isla was a saint or something like that.
No, it's a saint.
But
Don't let the perfect beat enemy of the good.
he didn't do this kind of damage that this guy is about to do if he gets, confirmed, right?
At least William Isla could name the divisions of the department.
Right. Yeah.
I have to say that.
At least sometimes he would answer his own phone.
He always answered his own phone.
Well,
it was
there you go.
amazing.
Yeah.
You called the department after hours, and it went directly to William's cell phone.
Which is why I want to go back to, she mentioned LERF, right?
Yeah.
He worked, among his volunteer work.
Land Use Research Foundation.
Land Use Research
Lobbyists
Foundation.
for developers.
He was asked one of his early meetings, he's been going around trying to sell his candidacy, his nomination to the public, and he went on Maui, and one of the questions from the people there was, do you do any volunteer work in your time? And he goes, oh yeah, I'm very proud. I do volunteer work for LERF, And LERF describes itself as the voice exclusively for developers. I mean, if you go to their website, they don't mask anything. They don't hide anything. And earlier when I worked as a lobbyist for an environmental group, I'd go to these hearings and there'd always be someone from the Land Use Research Foundation on the other side of the issue, consistently over the years, trying to weaken historic protections, environmental protections. And he said famously, Carlton said in this environmental caucus meeting, which is on video, you can find it on YouTube, Democratic Party Environmental Caucus, he said, I would never take a job that conflicted with what was in my heart.
Which makes you wonder. So how did he work for LERF?
He worked for LERF and the Building Industry Association, trying to weaken environmental protections for years. And if you say, well, what in your background shows us you're committed to the environment? He goes, well, when I was a little kid, I used to catch opu in the mountain stream.
It wasn't a mountain stream. It was a channelized stream next to Kaimuki High School.
And we can say LERF is no good for your surf.
Oh, you should go to public relations.
This is the English department here, so the poetry sort of, I think, trickles down. But so that was his thing. That was his story. He has a little stump speech going around. He says that he had an uncle who was mostly pure Hawaiian, who used to come home
real
from
uncle,
work.
it was a neighbor from across
Calabash
the street.
uncle.
Yeah.
And who used to eat poi and drink primo and cooked onions, I think it was. And then he would come with opai. The kid would come with opai and opu from the stream and would give it to uncle. And then uncle would say, oh, thank you. I'm going to grill him up right now. Oh, you sure you left enough for the future? Well, yes, uncle. So I learned as a small kid, you got to preserve. So how did you take those core values and live out your life by being a tool for developers?
And you worked in Castle and Cook, and stuff, and we know Castle and Cook, we don't.
But on Castle and Cook, what I say is if someone's a millionaire, right, and there are tax laws that have loopholes, and they take advantage of those loopholes, I don't really fault them. Right? But if they go down to the legislature and try to structure the tax system so that rich people don't have to pay any taxes, which is essentially what Lerf has done. So when he's working for Castle and Cook and he's looking out trying to push through a project for his company, that's one thing. But when he's going there trying to make it so that all developers are not restrained by environmental protection and the public lands are exposed to all these risks, that's wrong. That's above and beyond.
But that's why we have like lobbyists for tax laws, etc. So to make sure like there would be like all these, giveaways in taxes, etc. And not a loophole, it's like a loop, I don't know what, door or something, Yeah, so it's rather amazing. Okay, so here we talked about land use, which is important. And covers everything from real estate development to getting rid of conservation land or like compromise this conservation land for private use, private profit, and so forth. So all of that. But then, the question of, let's talk a little bit about the rail. I was going to talk about housing, but the rail. What else can we say about the rail in terms of what has it violated thus far, okay, in terms of, Native Hawaiian issues, the question of Hawai'i, etc., is important, right? It violated the promise that, it will pay for itself, but plus we need like some tax. How much we're paying in taxes? I forget how much we're paying in taxes for.
You're talking about the surcharge?
Yeah, the surcharge.
That they're trying to extend it down.
And then they want to keep it going till 2026, which is like which means that they have been like giving us hogwash all that time about costs and all of that. So one of you want to handle the situation first?
So at my core, I support public transportation, and I would like to see
Me too. I like
Honolulu
public
be one of those cities
yeah.
that has, some sort of rail system. But a light rail would have been so much better.
Yeah.
The takeaway message that I would like people to think about when they think about the rail is this concept of sunk costs. And we have sunk millions upon millions building the pillars so far, and it will cost several billion probably to take them down, but when it comes out in the balance, it might be better for us to consider taking it down now and starting over, as opposed to sinking an unknown amount of billions into building it.
After they damaged some water tables, I understand. Yeah. That we need, because we need water, and these guys got rid of a lot of water.
I'm not different from you folks in the sense that I am reflexively, all other things being equal, I'm reflexively pro-mass transit. And so when this project first started, I was hopeful, right? But increasingly it became, and I even accept that under capitalism, you're going to have crony capitalism where you're going to have politicians trying to award contracts to their friends, and in exchange they get campaign contributions, right? That sort of just goes along with,
But we have to do something about that too, anyway.
Yeah, but so what had happened though is more and more, that seemed to be the logic of what was driving things. I didn't understand why they built such a massive, huge system, right? Huge thing.
And goes where? Where does it go?
Yeah, and out in country, I would have had it at grade. I wouldn't have elevated it. You have the few roads that need to go over it or go under it, rather than have the whole thing elevated. When you get to the city, it may make sense that you have to have it elevated. I'm sorry, aesthetically. If you're not going to put it underground, and there are problems, technical problems underground with the water table and everything.
Why not just have it run right along the road?
Yeah.
Or through the road, through the traffic.
Or why not have like carts without like rails? So like in case something happened in the future in terms of development and etc. We can move it to another place.
Bus rapid transit, yes.
That's exactly what I mean. But I didn't want to say like buses. I say carts without rail.
But
it's served other communities very well.
As someone who has at various times in my life used the bus. I go back to a time, and I'm not singing his praises on everything, but Jeremy Harris liked the bus, believed in the bus, occasionally rode the bus and made his cabinet people ride the bus, went out and talked to the little old ladies in the back of Palolo and said, anything you want to change? Found out that they didn't like getting rained on. And so then he worked with the Lions Club and they built all these shelters and they delivered them all around the state. He's found out that people wanted bus schedules at cross points and he put those up. When Mufi Hanneman came in as mayor, he looked at the bus as just a budget item that was sucking all this money out. And so he jacked up the fares for, for people. And he started cutting back the bus service because it wasn't financially, good. So I couldn't trust that thing. And then Mufi, of course, it had to be my way or the highway. It was very heavy-handed. So I think eventually people started understanding this system doesn't make sense as a mass transit policy. It does make sense in terms of providing crony capitalist contracts.
Yeah, and he talks so softly, like, anyone who doesn't know his history in terms of politics would say, oh, yeah, this guy is,
a gentle giant.
Yeah, and he wants our own interest. He has our own interest at heart and all of that, which is actually not the case.
But if we have time,
yes, we do.
I'm wondering if we could talk about, and I'm expecting you as the professor to have the answers.
Oh, wow.
How we can mitigate the problems, how we can solve the economic crises and the environmental crisis. And I think that in part, Naomi Klein talked to that, and we kind of hinted on it in some of the discussion, where she said that we need to have, that it's related to the Citizens United. When you have such extreme inequality and all the wealth concentrated in very few hands who have a corporate interest in maintaining the system where they privatize all the gains and externalize the pollution and all the costs, unless we are able to have economic equality and political equality, then we're caught in this dynamic where it's only going to get worse and worse.
Yeah, the question then is, can we have climate change? I mean, can we get rid of this climate change or the worst of its impacts without having a system change? So is it climate change or system change? I mean, and then you spoke to system change from certain things that you're talking about, right? In terms of how you might mitigate certain things, right?
Well, I'm not going to sing the praise of the European nations, but on a lot of things like housing and education, for example, they have social policies in that take care and are more committed to the interests of the people than of the corporations.
That's right.
That's one of the battles going on, of course, right now in Europe with Spain and Greece.
Yeah, Greece, they're a basket case. I mean, Europe now is a basket case. And it might get even worse.
Just don't blame Greece for being in the basket. It's
the
Germans that are the basket.
Well, the Germans and the Americans, actually. Yeah. But anyway, any kind of ideas about that?
I would love to see Hawaii impose a polluter pays regime for any business that's done in Hawaii, and use that to fund the cleanup that's necessary as we transition to a cleaner economy.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's why, we wanted to talk about housing as well, but we alluded to housing, in terms of real estate and all of that, and freeing up some conservation land to put it in housing and all of that, which is, we need housing, but then they keep talking to us about, affordable housing. Well, who can afford the housing that they define as affordable? Not too many people. So anyway, we are flat out of time, and thank you, Marti, for coming over and sharing your ideas, and hopefully more. We'll do more stuff. Bart, it's always good to see you, and I'm glad you're here. And we go back a long way.
I can't wait to hear about that.
Yeah. So, over coffee maybe sometime. We will thank you again, and mahalo nui loa for our viewers, and see you next month.